I just spent approximately an hour uh, reading in the American accent, which isn't my native accent, but I spent an hour reading in that accent and tried to stay congruent in it, um, on a text that I've never read, uh, to see where would I slip up, or would I get too tired, would I slip out of the accent. And I didn't slip out of the accent, but I certainly disconnected from the text itself as I got tired and frustrated. Although I don't really know much about Wolfgang Mozart, when I was reading the text, the most struggle I had with the language as such as keeping in the accent was that the names of places, I couldn't pronounce the names of places in this specific text, and I couldn't pronounce properly the names of people. So that was interesting, because I found that as a problem when I was doing the English accent. So it's more, I can't sound out words more than I can stay in the accent, because I think I've been pretty congruent in the accent, and I don't think I've faltered much. I may have come out now and again. I didn't come out of the accent as much as now and again I heard a small bit of Irish accent seep into certain words. And I don't think that was laziness, it was just an unfamiliarity with such words. There might have been times when I was lazy, but it's definitely an interesting experiment to do, because after I've done that, I'm completely warmed up in the accent and I feel very comfortable in it. Not that I would say that it's completely perfect, but it's certainly not too bad as far as my ear can hear, and as far as I'm concerned. And basically what I'm doing here is, it's all about training the ear, and how fast can one train the ear, and can you pick up an accent like really quickly. And I mean, I haven't practiced that much on the American accent, but I think if you did that for a few days at that intensity, at that level, that you would definitely come through the accent. Definitely good exercise. I'm dyslexic, so sounding out certain words is quite difficult for me, so it's kind of humbling for me to read out loud and make mistakes on certain words or certain places and names. And it's nice to finish it off and stay in the same accent. So I think that's about it. Mozart to his father, 17th of October 1777. I must start with Steinberg's piano fortes. Before I saw any of Stein's work, I had always preferred Spath's piano, but now I prefer Stein's, as the damp so much better than Regenberg's instruments. If I strike hard, it doesn't matter whether I keep my finger down or raise it. The sound ceases the moment I produce it. However I attack the keys, the tone is always even. It doesn't produce a clattering sound. It doesn't get louder or softer or fail to sound at all. In a word, it's always even. It's true. He won't part with the pianoforte like this for under 300 florins, but the effort and labor that he expands on it can't be paid for. The particular feature of his instruments is their escape on action. Not one marker in 100 bothers with this, but without escape action, it's impossible for pianoforte not to produce a clattering sound or to go on sounding after the note has been struck. When you strike the keys, his hammers fall back again the moment they hit the strings, whether you hold down the keys or release them. He told me that only when he's finished making a piano like this does he sit down and try out the passage work, runs and leaps, and using a shave works away at the instrument until it can do everything. For he works only to serve music, not just for his own profit, otherwise he'd be finished at once. He often says that if he weren't such a great music lover and didn't have some slight skill on an instrument, He'd long since have run out of the patience with his work, but he loves an instrument that never lets the player down and that will last. His pianos will really last. He guarantees that the sounding board won't break or crack. Once he's finished making a sounding board for a piano, he puts it outside, exposing it to the air, rain, snow, heat of the sun, and the devils in order for it to crack. And then he inserts wedges, which he glues in it so that it's very strong and firm. He's perfectly happy for it to crack, as he's then assured that nothing more can happen to it. Indeed, it often cuts into himself and then glues it back together again and makes it really strong. He has completed 3 such pianofortes. Not until today did I play on one of them again. Today, the 17th, we had lunch with a young Herr Gassier, a young, handsome widower who's lost his young and beautiful wife. They'd been married for only 2 years. He's a most excellent and polite young man. We were splendidly entertained. Also, there was a collage of Abraham Henry, Bullinger, and Waschofer, an ex-Jesuit who's now Kapellmeister at the cathedral here. He knows Herr Schnachter very well. He was his Chormeister in Ingolstadt. He's called Peter Gerbel. I'm to give his best wishes to Herr Schnachter. After lunch, Herr Gasser and I went to Herr Stein's, where we were accompanied by one of his sisters-in-law, as well as Mama and our cousin. At 4 o'clock, we were joined by the Kapellmeister and Herr Schmidbohr, the organist at St. Ulrich's, a fine old gentleman who very well spoken, and then sight read sonata by Beckett that was quite hard and miserable. I can't begin to tell you how Kapellmeister and the organist crossed themselves both here and in Munich. I've played my 6 sonatas many times from memory. I played the 5th one in G at the Aristocrats concert in Bornstub. The one last in D sounds amazing on Stein's pianoforte. The device that you depress with your knee is also better made on this instrument than others. I scarcely need to touch it, and it works. And as soon as you remove your knee, even a little, you no longer hear the slightest reverberation. Tomorrow I may get around to his organ. I mean to write about them. I'm saving up his little daughter till the end. When I told Herr Stein that I'd like to play on his organ, as the organ was my passion, he was very surprised and said that a man like you, so great, a keyboard player, wants to play on an instrument that has a douceur, no expression, no piano or forte, but always sounds the same. None of that matters in my eyes and ears. The organ is the king of the instruments. Well, as you like, we went off together. I could already tell from what he said that he didn't think I'd do much on his organ, and that, for example, I'd play in a way more suited to piano. He told me that Schwarzbart had asked to be shown his organ, and I was afraid, he said, the Schwarzbart had told everyone, and the church was quite full, for I thought he'd be all spirit, fire, and speed, none of works of the organ. But as soon as he started, I changed my mind. I said only this: what do you think, Herr Stein? Do you think I'll run over the organ? Oh, that's quite different. He reached the choir. I began to improvise, by which point he was already laughing. And then a fugue. I can well believe, he said, that you enjoy playing the organ if you play like that. At first the pedal was a little strange, as it wasn't divided. It began with C and D and E in the same row, but with us D and E above, E flat and F sharp are here. But I soon got used to it. I also played on the old organ St. Ulrich's. The step up to it are a nightmare. I asked if someone could play on for me, as I wanted to go down and listen. From up there the organ is totally ineffectual, but I could make nothing of it. As the young choir master, a priest played only scales, so it was possible to form an impression. And when he tried to play some chords, he produced only discords. As it was out of time, after that we had to go to the coffee room, as my mother and cousin and Horr Steins were with us. A certain Pater Emilian, an arrogant ass and a simpleton of his profession, was in an especially hearty mood. He kept wanting to joke with my cousin, but she just made fun of him. Finally, when he was drunk, which didn't take long, he started to talk about music. He sang a canon, and I said I've never in my whole life heard a finer one. I said, I'm sorry, I can't join in, as I have no natural gift in intoning. That doesn't matter, he said. He started. I was the third voice, but I made up some very different words. For example, oh you prick, lick my arse, to my cousin. We laughed about it half an hour, he said to me. If only we could have spent longer together. I'd like to discuss the art of composition with you. Then the discussion would soon be over, I said. Get lost. To be continued. Leopold Mozart to his son, 23rd of October 1777. I must congratulate you on your name, but what can I wish you today that I don't always wish you? I wish you the grace of God, that it may accompany you everywhere and never abandon you, as indeed it will never do if you strive to fulfill the obligations of a true Catholic Christian. You know me. I'm no pedant. I'm no holier than thou, and I'm certainly no hypocrite, but surely won't refuse a request from your father. It is this, that you should be concerned for your soul's welfare and not cause your father any anxiety in his hour of death, so that at the difficult time he won't have to reproach himself for neglecting your soul's salvation. Farewell, be happy. Lead a sensible life, honor and esteem your mother, who has much toil in her old age. Love me as I love you. Your truly solicitous father, Leopold Mozart to his son. I really don't know what to say. I was so stunned by your last letter of the 16th, in the announced with the display of the greatest nonchalance. Herr Schmelz, presumably the father, brother, and relation of Herr Schmelz of the leather factory in Munich, and possibly even Herr Schmelz himself, had apologized for the fact that he had no instruction to give you any money. I can well believe that, and he was right. You should have asked Herr Herzog or the firm Nocker or Still to provide you with a little extra credit, as I used to do, for they had no orders from the Hergens nor House to extend his credit everywhere else, and no businessman exceeds his literal orders, but it would have been done if he asked them. But this incident was described in such a matter of fact, in different terms, as though I'd whole chest full of money, and should have been terribly annoyed that you'd not been paid at once. I won't waste time with a long-winded account of the circumstances. You know them yourself, as does Mama, and in later of the 20th I listed the main items, although I forgot the sizable sum that we owe to Hognor for goods, but with whom we're not writing up a single farthing more on credit. But what amazed me most of all on the receiving your letter was that you suddenly came out of this story without telling me about it. In your previous letter, in which you simply said that money would have been more useful and appropriate for your journey than a trinket, as you knew even then that you were low on funds. If Herr Schmaltz had been willing, I would have been lumbered with the instructions for payment without having received the slightest advance notice, and at the time when I suspected nothing. That's a pretty state of affairs indeed. I leave you to think it over. In the light of my present circumstances, you wrote me from Augsburg that you'd lost only 27 florins. According to my calculations, you must still have 170 florins, even if you'd lost 30 florins. Even if that stupid trip to Mannheim via Wallerstein's cost you 70 florins, you should still be left with 100 florins. Even if it cost you more, you can really not have enough left to be able to make the journey Mans. You'd then be near Frankfurt, and it absolutely necessary would be able to draw a little with your second letter of credit from Herr Bollingora in Frankfurt. Then you'd only have to ask some businessman in Mans who's in contact with Herr Bollingora. He would have undertaken to send the letter of the credit to Herr Boulogne and to draw what you require. Wouldn't this have been more sensible than to settle down in Mannheim and squander your money to no avail, as the money would presumably have enabled you to make the journey, which would have cost perhaps 15 or 16 florins? It's only 1 1/4 stages to Worms, 2 to Oppenheim, and 1 to Mainz, so only 3 3/4 in all. And even if you had a little or no money on arrival, we have acquaintances who would help you, and no matter need be ashamed if he hasn't a farthing in his pocket, but can produce a little of credit. This can help or happen to the wealthiest and most distinguished people. Indeed, it's a maxim when traveling that, if possible, you should carry only as much money as you need. I'm still in the dark, and if I speak of Mans, it's pure suspicion, as you haven't done me the honor in any of your letters to tell me where you are intending to go, and only at the last moment did you write to me from Augsburg and say you were going to Wallerstein, and Herstein wrote to say that you left for Wallerstein and Mannheim at 7:30 on a Sunday, but such things should be announced some time in advance, as I can sometimes make useful preparations and send reminders, just as I was at the pains to do writing to Herr Otto and Herr Pfeil in Frankfurt. Of course, your journey is no concern of mine. Isn't that so? You could, of course, have taken a very different route from Mannheim, namely Wurzburg, and from there to Margrave at Darmstadt, then Frankfurt and Mainz. But how can I guess what you're thinking or make suggestions, as I'm never consulted and didn't know how things stood in Mannheim? Indeed, to judge by your letter, in which you had the opportunity to speak so familiar with the elector as was bound to assume that you had different plans and were intending to stay there for some time, all of which, whatever your opinions, inclinations, aim, etc. may be, you should have reported honestly and in good time, as it takes 12 days to receive and reply to a letter, even if all goes smoothly. But you didn't bother to consider this either, as in your last letter of the 16th you wrote that I could continue to write you in Mannheim, although it would be 12 days at the quickest before you received this letter, in other words, not until the 28th, by which time Herr Herzog would long since have replied, and you will have left. But I did not receive your letter until Friday, the 21st, as a present on our wedding day and was unable, therefore, to reply until the 24th. You'll have to read this letter, God knows where, on the 1st or the 2nd of December. Neither of you must think that I don't know how many incidental expenses are incurred on the journey and how money vanishes into the thin air, especially when one's over generous or too kind. My dear wife prided herself on getting up early, on not lingering, and on doing everything quickly and economically. 16 days in Munich, 14 days in Eisenberg, and now, according to the letter of the 16th of November, 17 days in Mannheim, which, including the time spent waiting for a reply from Augsburg, will turn out to be 3 weeks. That's sorcery indeed. You've been away 8 weeks. In other words, 2 months, and you're already in Mannheim. That's incredibly quick. When we traveled to England, we spent 9 days in Munich, called on the Elector and Duke Clemens, and had to wait for our present. We were 15 days in Eisenberg, but we gave 3 concerts there, namely on the 28th and the 30th of June and July. We left Salzburg on the 9th of June and did not arrive in Munich until the 12th, as new wheels had to be made in Weserberg. Yet, in spite of this, we were in Schwitzingen by the 13th of July, although we broke our journey in Ulm, Lüneburg, and Burchal. So you see that your long and unnecessary stay has ruined everything. The most beautiful autumn in living memory has come and gone, and so far you've regarded your journey as no more than a pleasure trip and spent the time enjoying yourselves. Now the bad weather, shorter days, and cold are here, with more of shame to come, while your prospects and goals are now correspondingly expensive and distant. You can't spend the whole winter traveling, and if you plan to stay anywhere, it should be in the large town with lots of people, where there are hopes and opportunities of earning some money. And where is such a place to be found in the whole of the region apart from Paris? But life in Paris requires a completely different attitude to life, a different way of thinking. You have to be attentive and every day think of ways of earning money and exercise extreme politeness in order to ingratiate yourself with people of standing. I'll write more of this in my next letter, in which I shall also set out ideas on a quite different route that may be worth taking, and which I believe will get you to Paris more quickly, namely from Koblazine and Trier, Luxembourg, and Sedan. Here, Zijahan, who visited us in her Waller, has textile factory. Perhaps he'll be there now. Then Rethel, Reims, Socians, and Paris. Note that from Paris to Rethel there are 22 French post stages. From Rethel it's only a stone's throw to Sedan, Luxembourg. 2 isn't far, and Trier is close to Luxembourg, and Luxembourg is an imposing fortress, and there'll be lots of officers there. Reims and Soissons are larger towns. In all these places it will be relatively easy to earn some money in order to recover your traveling expenses, and virtuosos rarely visit such places. By contrast, it's 34 post stages from Brussels to Paris, and these cost us 20 louis d'or for 7 horses, without our receiving a farthing in return. And between Koblenz and Brussels, there's nothing that can be done except perhaps the Elector of Cologne, perhaps, and what about Brussels means whichever route you take, make sure that you attain some letters of recommendation to take with you to Paris. It doesn't matter who writes them, business, courtiers, etc. And is there no French ambassador or resident in Mainz or Koblenz? I don't think there is. You haven't got any letters of recommendation, whereas I had a lot. They're vital in providing you with both patronage and contacts. A journey like this is no joke. You've no experience of this sort of thing. You need to have the other more important thoughts of your mind than foolish games. You have to try anticipate 100 different things. Otherwise, you'll suddenly find yourself in the shit without any money. And where you've no money, you'll have no friends either. Even if you give 100 lessons for nothing, and even if you write sonatas and spend every night fooling around from the 10 till 12 instead of devoting yourself to more important matters, then try asking for credit. That'll wipe the smile off your face. I'm not blaming you for a moment for placing the concubines under an obligation. You can buy your acts of kindness that was well done, but you should have devoted a few of your otherwise idle hours each evening to your father, who is concerned about you, and sent him not simply a mishmash of tossed off in a hurry, but a proper, confidential, and detailed account of the expenses incurred on your journey, of the money you still have left, of the journey you plan to take in the future, of your intonations in Mannheim, etc. In short, you should have sought my advice. I hope you will be sensible enough to see this, for who has the shoulder this whole burden of not your poor old father? As I've already said, I didn't receive a letter until the 21st, and was unable to reply until today. Yesterday, the 23rd, I confessed my sins at Holy Trinity, and with the tears in my eyes commended you both in the protection of the Almighty God. In the afternoon, we had a target practice. The price was offered in Cajetan and Autritter and one Herr Bullinger, who sent his best wishes, was also somewhat taken aback by your letter, and it struck me that in the present serious situation he didn't appreciate your joke about the public debate. At 5:30 I then went to see Herr Heidenberg to ask him that if the Messrs. Nock and Schleidner had not informed him by post that they had transferred some money to you, he might care to write to Augsburg. By today's post, I returned to the shop this morning and spoke to Herr Joseph. I discovered that although he'd received letters from Knocker or Schittel, there's no received letter from... There's no worry about you. He promised to write today. I've now done all I can to hope that in the meantime you'll have received some money. Knocker and Schittel won't send me a report until they know how much you've been given. NB, it's always better when drawing money to accept no florins, but the local currency, e.g. 6, 7, etc., or whatever. I've now told you what was weighing on my mind. It is God's own truth. You'll have to learn yourself that it is no joke to undertake a journey like this and to have to live on a random income. Above all, you must pray most earnestly to the God for good health. Be your own guard against the wicked people. Earn money by every means that is known available to you, and spend it with the greatest care. I prefer to give too little to someone who is traveling with me and whom I may never see again, and risk being called a skinflint, rather than have him laugh at me behind my back for giving him too much. I have no more paper. I'm tired, especially my eyes. Nanrel and I wish you the best of health, and with all our hearts kiss you a million times. I'm your old husband and father, but MB, not your son. I hope you'll receive my letter of the 20th, in which I told you to write in Monsieur Grimm in Paris, also what you should write to the Prince of Chemsee in Munich. By the next post, I'll send you a list of the stages to Paris and opinion, etc. Also a list of our former acquaintances in Paris. Adieu. Okay, on to the second part. I received your letter of the 24th this morning. See from it is that you are unable to reconcile yourself to faith, be it good or bad, when it takes us by surprise until now, and as things stand for the four of us, never been happy or unhappy, and for that I thank God. You reproach us both for many things without deserving it. We are not incurring any expenses that are not necessary, and that what is necessary when traveling, you know as well as we do, if not better, that we stayed so long in Munich was the fault of no one but myself, and it had been alone. I'd certainly have stayed in Munich. Why did we spend 2 weeks in Augsburg? I'm tempted to think that you didn't receive my letters from Augsburg. I wanted to give a concert. I was let down. Meanwhile, a whole week went by. I was absolutely determined to leave. They wouldn't let me. They wanted me to give a concert. I wanted them to beg me. And so they did. I gave a concert. There are your 2 weeks. Why did you go straight to Mannheim? I answered this question in my last letter. Why are we still here? Yes, you can really think that I remained somewhere for no reason, but I could have told my father, all right, you shall know reason, and indeed the whole course of the events, but God knows that I had no wish to speak about it because I was unable to go into detail, and any more than I can do today. I know you well enough to appreciate that the vague account would have caused you worry and distress, something I've always tried to avoid, but if you ascribe the cause to my negligence, thoughtlessness, and indolence, I can only thank you for the higher opinion of me and sincerely regret that you don't know your own son. I'm not thoughtless, but I am prepared for anything, and as a result can wait patiently for whatever the future holds in store, and I'm able to endure it as long as my honor and good name of Mozart don't suffer in the consequence. Well, if it must be so, then let it be so, but I must ask you at the outset not to rejoice or grieve prematurely, for whatever happens, all is well as long as we remain healthy, for happiness consists simply in our imagination. Last Tuesday week, the 18th, the day before St. Elizabeth's Day, I saw Count Savolia in the morning and asked him if there was any chance that the Elector would keep me here this winter. I wanted to teach a young prince. He said yes. I suggest to the Elector, and if it's up to me, it will certainly happen. That afternoon I saw Cannabich, and as it was at this suggestion that I'd been to see the Count, he asked me at once if I had been there. I told him all that had happened. He said to me, I'd very much like you to spend the winter here with us, but I'd like to even more if you had the proper permanent appointment. I said that there was nothing I'd like more than to be always near them, but that I really didn't know how it would be possible for me to stay permanently. You've already got 2 Kapellmeisters, so I don't know what I could do, as I wouldn't lie to the under-vulgar, nor shall you, he said. None of the members of the orchestra here is under the Kapellmeister, or even under the intendant. The Elector could make you his chamber composer. Wait, I'll speak to the Count about it. There was a big concert on Thursday. When the Count saw me, he apologized for not having said anything, but the galas were still going on. But as soon as galas were over, namely on Monday, he would certainly speak to the elector. I left it for 3 days, and as I heard nothing, I went to see him in order to make inquiries. He said, "My dearest Monsieur Mozart, this was Friday, namely yesterday. There was a hunt today, so I've been unable to ask the elector, but by the time of tomorrow I shall certainly be able to give you an answer." I begged him not to forget. To tell the truth, I was rather angry when I left him and decided to take the young Count my 6 easiest variations of Fischer's Minute, which I'd already had copied out, here for the very purpose, in order to have the opportunity to speak of an elector in the person. When I arrived, you can't imagine how pleased the governess was to see me. I received the most courteous welcome. When I took out the variations and said that they were for the Count, she said, "Oh, that's good for you, but have you also got something for the Countess?" "Not yet," I said, "but if I were to stay here long enough to write something, I'll be..." "By the way," she said, "I'm glad that you'll be staying here all winter." "Me? I didn't know that. That surprises me. It's curious the elector himself told me so recently. By the way, he said Mozart is staying here this winter." "Well, if he did indeed say that, then he's the one person who can say it, for without the elector I certainly can't remain here." I told her the story, the whole story. We agreed that I'd return the next day, namely today, after 4 o'clock, and bring something of the Countess. You'll speak to the elector before I arrive, and he'll still be with you when I get there. I went back there today, but he didn't come. But I'll go again tomorrow. I've written a rendezvous for the Countess. Don't I have a reason enough to remain here and wait the outcome? Should I leave now that the greatest step has been taken? I know I have a chance to speak to the elector himself. I think I shall probably remain here all winter, as the elector is fond of me. He thinks highly of me and knows that what I can do. I hope to be able to give you some good news in my next letter. I beg you once again not to rejoice or worry too soon, and to confide in this story in no one except Herr Bullinger and my sister. I'm sending my sister the Allegro and Andante for the sonnets for Millie Cannabich. The rendezvous will follow shortly. It would have been too much to send them all together. You'll have to make do with the original. You have it copied more easily. 6 kreuzers a page. Then I can add 24 kreuzers. Don't you find that expensive, Jew? I kiss your hand 100,000 times and embrace my sister with all my heart. I am your obedient son, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You'll probably have already heard a little of a sonata as it's sung, banged out, fiddled, and whistled at least 3 times a day at Cannabich's, only sotto voce, of course. My dear husband, I kiss you and Nanro many thousand times and ask you to give our best wishes to all the acquaintances. I'll write more next time, but it's turned midnight. Adieu. I remain your faithful wife. Leopold Mozart to his wife and son, 4th of December, 1777, Salzburg. My dear wife and dear son, I have no obligation to your having to wait for what you've told me about in your last letter, and there's nothing more that can be said about all this that has happened on your journey and that has turned out differently from what I've expected and worked out to our disadvantage, even caused us obvious harm, as it is all over and done with and can no longer have been changed. But the fact that you, my son, write that all speculation is superfluous and of no avail, as we cannot know what is to happen, that is indeed ill considered and was undoubtedly written unthinkingly. No sensible person, I shall not say, no Christian will deny that everything will and must happen according to God's will. But does it follow from this that we should act blindly, live carefree lives, make no provisions for the future, and simply wait for things to befall us for their own accord? Does God himself, indeed, do all rational people not demand that in our actions we consider their consequences and outcome, at least as far as our human powers of reason enable us to, and that we make every effort to see as far ahead of us as we can? If this is necessary in all actions, how much more is it in the present circumstances on our journey? Or have you not already suffered the consequences of this? Is it enough for you to have taken the step of the elector in order to remain there throughout the winter? Shouldn't you long ago have thought of a plan that can be implemented if things don't work out? And shouldn't you have told me about it long ago and learnt my views on it? And now you write what? If we were after all to leave here, we'll go straight to Weilenberg, to the Princess of Nassau-Weilenberg, for whom you wrote the sonatas in Holland, etc. There we'll stay as long as the officer's table is to our liking. What sort of a tale is that, like everything else you wrote? This is language of a desperate man who is trying to console both himself and me. But there's still a hope that you'll receive 6 louis d'or, and that will make everything all the right. But my question to you now is whether you're certain that the princess is there. She won't be there without good reason, as her husband is based in The Hague on account of his military office. Shouldn't you have told me about this long ago? Another question, wouldn't you be better to go to Mainz and from the Weilenberg via Frankfurt? After all, if you go to Mannheim to Weilenberg, you'll cross the Frankfurt road, and as you're not staying in Weilenberg forever, the Mainz road will take you back through Frankfurt. If you go first to Mainz and then Weilenberg, you'll only have a short distance of Weilenberg to the Koblenz, which will presumably take you to via Nassau. Or do you indeed to avoid Mainz, where we've so many good friends and where we've earned 200 florins, 3 concerts, even without paying for the elector, who is ill? Tell me, my dear son, are these useless speculations? Your dear good mamma told me she'd keep a careful note of your expenses. Good. I've never asked for a detailed account and never thought of demanding one, but when you arrived in Augsburg, you should have written to say we paid such and such at Albert in Munich, and such was spent in travel expenses, so that we still have such and such a sum from Augsburg. You wrote to say that after taking account of the concert receipts, you were about 20 florins out of pocket. In your second letter from Mannheim, you should at least have said that the journey cost us such and such and the amount, and were not left with, so that I could have made arrangements in good time. Was my arrangement to send your letter of credit to Augsburg a useless speculation? Do you really think that Herzog, who's a good old friend of mine, would have provided you with money in response to all your letters in Mannheim? If you'd only already given him a letter of credit, certainly not. The most that he would have done would have been to make inquiries with him first. Why did I have to discover that you needed money only when you were in trouble? You wanted to wait to see what the elector gave you. Isn't that so? Perhaps. In order to spare me the worry, but it would have caused me less worry if I'd been told everything honestly and in good time, as I know better than either of you know how. One must be prepared for all eventualities on the journey in order not to be placed in some terrible predicament at the moment when one least expects it. As such times, all your friends disappear. One must be cheerful, one must enjoy oneself, but one must also find the time to give serious thought to these matters, and this must maintain concern when traveling, and when not a single day should be allowed to pass to your disadvantage. The days slip past, days which are in any case very short and present, and which all cost money at the inn. Merciful heavens, you ask me not to speculate now that I am 450 florins in debt entirely thanks to you two, and you think that you may be able to put me in a good mood by telling me 100 foolish jokes. I'm pleased that you are in good spirits, but instead of good wishes set out the form of the alphabet, I'd have felt happier if you told me the reasons for and the circumstances of your journey, Weilenberg, and what you plan to do afterwards, and most of all, if you'd listened to my opinion. And this could have been done before the post day, as you can't only just have hit on the idea, nor can you know independently that the princess is there unless someone had already suggested the idea to you. In a word, it is not idle speculation when one has something in mind and formulates 2 or 3 plans and makes necessary arrangements in the advances, so that if one plan does work out and one can easily turn to another, anyone who acts otherwise is unintelligent or thoughtless person who, especially in today's world, will always be left behind no matter how clever he is, and who will even be unhappy as he will always be duped by the flatterers, false friends, and those who envy him. My son, to find one man in 1,000 who is your true friend for reasons other than self-interest is one of the greatest wonders of this world. Examine all who call themselves your friends, or who make a show of friendship, and you'll find the reason why this is so. If they're not motivated by self-interest on their account, then they'll be acting in the interests of some other friend whom they need, or they are your friend so that by singling you out they can annoy some third party. If nothing comes of Mannheim, you'll still have your plan to go to Mainz and Frankfurt and Wallenberg and Koblenz, etc. One should always look for places as close to each other as possible, so that if you can, the journey should be kept short and you can soon get to the place where you'll find a source of income. If this letter doesn't reach you in Mannheim, you're already in Wallenberg. I can't help you, but if you're still in Mannheim and you have to leave, then Mama will see from the map that your best plan is to go to Mainz first. Otherwise, you'll either have to forgo Mainz or retrace your steps a little. Weilenberg, you'll need to bear in mind that you'll not find a Catholic church there, as everyone in Lutheran or Calvinist, so I prefer you not to spend too long there. And who told you that you'd have to go through the forest of the Spessart to get from Würzburg and Mannheim, as the Spessart is near Auschenberg, between Fulda and Frankfurt. This is no doubt some other trick that Herr Becky has played on you. Auschenberg and Würzburg are 10 miles apart. It may be that one drives past the forest on the right-hand side for some hours, or one approaches Mannheim, but there's nothing near Würzburg, whether you've been there or not. MB, I have another observation to make about the journey that you may choose to make from Weilenberg or to Koblenz. Namely, the road is across the country and will be safer than the one of Mainz to Koblenz, which is too near the Rhine. I now want to know all your other plans. I'd never have suspected that my own dear wife wouldn't have given me the occasional accurate account of your traveling expense, as I've twice asked about Albert's bill and should have also have been told about the bill from the landlord of the Lamb, etc., etc., but not allowed to know about our expenses, and so I must ask Mamma to write me a confidential letter on this point. I don't want to wordly explanation, but would just like to see from the landlord's bill how people have been treating you and where all the money is gone. We must now give serious thought to the ways and means of getting you out of the present situation of the traveling economically as possible, and making sensible arguments. But all events, you must let me know at once what you may be to our detriment and advantage. Oh no, a count must sell you the chase. May God keep both you and me well. Nannerl, I'll kiss you many billion times. I am your husband and father. Count Caesarion has asked me to give you the best wishes. There was a rumor not only the Archbishop will be sending Haydn to Italy, but he had already wanted to send to Bozen with Trindle, but Herr Trindle excused himself. I beg you, my dear Wolfgang, consider everything and don't always write about things when they're already over and done with, otherwise you will all be unhappy. My dear son, in all probability this will be the last letter you can be certain of receiving from me in Mannheim, and so it is addressed to you alone. How hard it is for me to accept that you are moving even further away from me is something you may perhaps be able to imagine, but you cannot feel as acutely as I do the weight that lies on my mind. If you take the trouble to recall what I did to you, to your two children during the tender youth, you'll not excuse of timidly, like everyone else, will concede that I am a man and always had the courage to risk everything, but I did everything with the greatest caution and consideration that were humanly possible. One can prevent accidents for God alone and to foretell the future. Until now, of course, we've been neither happy nor unhappy, but thanks to the God, we've trodden a million course. We've tried everything to make you unhappy, and through you to make ourselves happier, and the least place you destiny and firmer footing and faith was against us. As you know, our last step was left in the very deep waters, and you also know that I am now around 700 florins in debt, and don't know how I shall support myself and your mother and your sister and my monthly income. For as long as I live, I cannot hope to receive another farthing from the prince. So it must be clear as day to you that the future of faith of your old parents and your sister undoubtedly loves you with all her heart, lies solely in the hands ever since you were born, and indeed before that. In other words, ever since I was married, there is no doubt that I have had a difficult time providing a livelihood for a wife and 7 children, 2 servants, and Mama's mother, all on a fixed monthly income of only a little more than 20 florins, and to pay for accouchments, debts, and illnesses and expenses, which, if you think them over, will convince you not only that I have never spent a farthing on the least pleasure for myself, but that without God's special mercy I'd never have managed to keep out of death in spite of all the hopes and bitter efforts. Yet this is the first time I've been in debt I gave up every hour of my life to you in hope of ensuring not only that in due course you'd both be able to count on being able to provide for yourselves, but that I too would be able to enjoy a peaceful old age and accountable to the God for children's education, with no more cares but being able to live solely for my soul's salvation and calmly awaiting by end. But God was willed and ordained that I must once again take undoubtedly wearisome task of giving lessons, and doing so moreover in the town where these strenuous efforts are so badly paid that it is not possible every month to earn enough to support oneself and one's family. Yet one must be glad and talk oneself hoarse in order to earn at least something. Not only do I not distrust my dear Wolfgang, not in the very least, but I place all my trust and hope in the faithful love. All depends on your good sense, which your certainty have if only you will listen to it, and on the fortunate circumstances this latter cannot be occurred, but you will always consult your good sense. At least I hope so, and beg of you to do so. You're not entering a completely different world, and you mustn't think that it is simply prejudice that makes me see Paris as such dangerous places. Contour from my own experience, I've no reason at all to regard Paris as so very dangerous, but my situation then could not be more different from yours. We stayed with an ambassador on the second occasion in the self-contained apartment. I was a man of mature years, and you were children, avoided all contact with others, and in particular preferred not to become over-familiar with the people of our own profession. Remember that profession. Remember that I did the same in Italy. I made the acquaintance and sought out the friendship only of people of higher social class, among these only mature people, not young lads, not even if they were or foremost rank. I never invited anyone to visit me, and regularly in the rooms, in order to be able to maintain a freedom, and always consider it more sensible to visit others at my convenience. If I don't like a person, or if I'm working or have a business to attend to, I can stay away. Conversely, if people come to me and behave badly, I don't have to get rid of them, and even a person who is otherwise and not unwelcome may prevent me from getting on with some important work. You're a young man of 22, and so you don't have the earnestness of old age that could deter a young lad or whatsoever social class, be he adventurer, joker, or fraud, and be he young or old, from seeking out the acquaintance and friendship and drawing you into his company, and then gradually into his plans. One is drawn imperceptibly into this, and cannot then escape, and shan't even mention women, for here one needs the greatest restraint and reason, as nature herself is our enemy, and man does not apply his whole reason and show the necessary restraint, will later do so in vain in his attempt to escape from the labyrinth, a misfortune that mostly ends only in death. You yourself may perhaps already have learned from your limited experience how blindly we may often be taken in by jests and flatteries and jokes, and initially seem unimportant, but at which reasons, when she awakes later on, is ashamed. I don't want to reproach you. I know that you love me, and not just as a father, but also your staunchest and surest friend, and that you know and realize that our happiness and misfortune, indeed my very life, whether I live in the ripe old age or die,